Recently, a viewer asked me if I had feelings about free patterns. Yes, I've knit many fabulous things from free patterns. I knit this, I knit this, I knit this, this. Free patterns are fantastic unless they're not. Sometimes free patterns can cost you big, and I'm not necessarily talking about money. Whether it's your time, your yarn, or your sanity, yes, your sanity, those free patterns might have a hidden price. So today we're diving into the good, the bad, and the downright ugly of free patterns. Follow me into the lounge and let's break down the hidden costs of that so-called bargain pattern you just downloaded. All right, let's start with the obvious. Why are we so drawn to free patterns? Because they're free. They can be perfect for beginners because they do tend to be simpler. Or maybe you just want to try something new without committing any cash to the situation. Plus, they are everywhere. Ravelry, blogs, Pinterest, and a source that you may never have even considered. But we're going to talk about that later. All those patterns are just a click away. But, and it's a big but, shut up, Oscar. Not all free patterns are created equal. Let's start by looking at the pros and cons of free patterns. Pro, free access. Obviously, no cost means that anyone can try them, no financial commitment required. They are good for beginners. As I said before, they tend to be simpler, and we will discuss why in a little bit, which can make them ideal for new knitters, with a big caveat, but we're going to talk about that too. Pro, testing the waters. They're perfect for trying out new techniques or a new designer without you having to spend any money on something when you don't know whether or not you're going to love the result. All good things. But now we're going to talk about the cons. They can be a giant time suck. Okay, the pattern didn't cost you a penny, but the hours you will spend trying to figure out why it's not working, that's where things start to get expensive. Have you ever had a pattern that was written so vaguely that you think, am I supposed to be a cryptographer? Am I knitting here or solving the Da Vinci Code? Whew, that's dating myself. Many free patterns lack the detailed instructions and good schematics that paid patterns can provide. This can definitely up the trickiness if you're following a more complex type of design. Pro tip: if a pattern takes longer to figure out than it does to knit, it's already too expensive. And then there's the editing, or lack thereof. For a second, let's talk about the unsung hero of our knitting world, the tech editor. Or in the case of most free patterns, the lack of a tech editor. You know, the person who checks the pattern before you knit it to see if it's actually knittable. Free patterns are often self-published and untested, which means that no one is checking the numbers to make sure that everything adds up. And then there's the issue of potentially wasting some very valuable yarn. If there is a problem with that free pattern that causes you to have to frog it back over and over again, and if you invested in some very special yummy yarn for that project, the wear and tear of ripping that yarn back again and again and again can take its toll. Your beautiful yarn might not be so beautiful anymore. And last, customer support. Not likely. With paid patterns, there usually is an expectation that you can email the designer to ask questions if something isn't clear. With a free pattern, it's going to be more like, sorry kid, you're on your own. So why are free patterns such a gamble of our time and money? There's a really good reason. These are all of my own knitting designs. How many have I published? Not a single one. Why? I'm glad you asked that question. I'm happy to answer it. Because writing a good pattern is hard and it takes a lot of time, investment, and energy. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you've heard me whine many times about how my time is limited. No, Oscar, you weren't whining. I was whining this time. And once you've gotten them written, they need tech editing. Tech editing costs money, and then they need testing. Testing can also cost money. There are some designers who pay their test knitters. Now, I'm not starting any arguments today. This is a very controversial subject. We may discuss it another time. And then once your pattern is published, if you're charging for it, you hope that you sell enough of them to at least cover the costs of creating that pattern. And if you give them away for free, well, you just hope for good karma. The moral of this story is that any pattern that was free to you probably was at some cost at least to that designer. A little bit later, I'll give you some ideas about how to show some love and appreciation for those designers in lieu of cash. Okay, Nicole, but I've got no money. I need to use free patterns. Where do I find the good ones? Here are a few tips to make sure that when you select a free pattern, you're getting something worth knitting. First of all, check for reviews. As we've discussed in my How to Use Ravelry series, link up there, you can read through the comments on the pattern page itself or the comments on the project pages to see if anybody had any issues with that particular free pattern. If it's on a blog site on the web, there may be a comment section underneath that free pattern on the blog. If the pattern has had multiple complaints about errors in those places, it might not be worth the hassle. And like we talked about in my Ravelry series, look at the photos of the finished projects. Are there any real-world photos from actual knitters? If those photos look good, that's a good sign that that pattern is knitworthy. Check for any errata. Errata means there are mistakes that have been discovered and corrected. On pattern pages on Ravelry, sometimes if you read down in the description, it will say errata can be found here, and there'll be a link. It might be down in the main description or it might be off to the side. Just look for the word errata, or just Google the pattern name and errata and see if something comes up. Many designers and yarn companies, Vogue Knitting, Barocco, they have entire pages on the website dedicated just to providing errata when they have it. And here's a big one: designer credibility. Many amazing designers give away patterns for free as a way to share their work with the community, build goodwill, and earn future customers. There's that karma I was talking about. If you trust a designer's previous work or their paid patterns, then there's a really good likelihood that their free patterns are going to be absolutely knittable. Here's a few sources that I know I feel confident about using their free patterns. Purl Soho. Purl Soho is now an online yarn shop in New York City. They used to have a brick and mortar, but sadly they shut it down. They have amazing designs. I have knit many Purl Soho's patterns. This is a modification of a Purl Soho cowl. This is a modification of a Purl Soho cowl. This gorgeous squishy garter blanket is a Purl Soho design. This is the library blanket. I've also knit several baby ear flap hats and a beautiful little clean and simple baby dress, among other things. Go check them out. The downside of the Purl Soho free patterns is the format is a little challenging. You get the free patterns on a web page. The instructions are very spread out over a long stretch of web space, with lots of photos, lots of links to yarn. Sometimes there's advertisements in there. It can take printing off several pages to actually extract out the pattern information itself. I will sometimes do things like cut and paste sections off the web page into a Word document on my computer to put together my own version of that web pattern. But I figure it's the price I pay for the pattern not having a price. Knitty. Knitty has been a free online magazine that has been around for, I think, 24 years. Their designers are paid for the patterns, so you know they're going to be good. Anybody remember the Clapote by Kate Gilbert from 2004? Now I'm really dating myself. There are over 23,000 Clapote projects on Ravelry. I started one way back in the mid-2000s somewhere, but sadly I never finished it. Not because it's a bad pattern, it just didn't happen. Also from Ravelry, I've knit Tie One On. This was my dear, dear, dear work friend and colleague and work mom, Mari, who has sadly left us a few years back. Miss you, Mari. I've knit the monkey socks, a headband called Caliometry. That wasn't for me. I know I don't look terrible in it. I gave it away. The Gemini sweater by Jane Richmond. My mom has that one. More than a few pairs of these fetching mitts. I've knit these at least 4 times. And I also knit this semi-ridiculous steering wheel cover for my old Mazda. It turned ratty pretty quickly and it slipped around on the wheel a lot. It's cute, but I don't necessarily recommend knitting that one. So go check out Knitty. All the links for these sources are going to be down in the description box. As always, Kate Atherley. She has at least 10 free sock patterns, and she is a sock knitting expert. She's also a tech editor and an amazing teacher. So those patterns are perfection. Go get one. Joji Locatelli has some beautiful free patterns. This Odyssey shawl is one that has been in my favorites, and it might even be in my queue at the moment for a long time. I just love it. And she also has a free sweater pattern called All Together. You don't find a lot of free sweater patterns, and that's for the very reasons I explained earlier, along with all the other work you have to do for publishing a pattern design. With sweaters, you also have to add grading, which is a whole other level of math. And grading is the process of taking a pattern from the sample size and expanding it up and down into smaller and larger sizes that actually will fit all of those bodies well. It's a highly valuable skill. And frankly, I think people should pretty much almost always charge for their patterns if they've designed a sweater in multiple sizes. But as I said before, there are some designers who will have 1 or 2 free patterns for the purposes of good karma and goodwill. And Joji is one of them. Lucky us. And of course, how can I talk about free patterns without mentioning Tin Can Knits? They have a whole collection of free patterns designed specifically for beginner and intermediate knitters called the Simple Collection. Those patterns are phenomenal. I have knit the rye socks many, many times, and I knit the harvest cardigan, and they also have the flax pullover in 3 different weights and 20 different sizes. If you want to know more about Tin Can Knits, check the link up there. My last video was all about their app, which makes using their free patterns phenomenally easy and fun. Okay, so you knit a designer's free pattern, you loved it, it turned out beautifully, and now you'd like to show them some appreciation. Here are some ways you can do that. Leave a review or a comment somewhere in the social media realm. That can be on the pattern page on Ravelry, can be on Instagram, on Pinterest, Facebook, wherever that particular designer is selling or showing off their patterns. Tell people how much you appreciate their great pattern. It helps them a lot. Share your projects. Post your beautifully finished projects on Ravelry or Instagram. Show them off. Tell others how wonderful they are. We all love to look at other people's projects. And make sure you tag the designer when you post on social media. It really helps with spreading the word about their work and gives them more visibility. You can donate or buy or gift some of their paid patterns. Many designers have both free and paid patterns. If you love their free content, consider buying one of their paid patterns or throwing them a bit of cash in the form of a donation if they happen to have that option available. Okay, it's 2024, and so I am bound by law to have a segment about ChatGPT and AI if we are talking about free content. You may have been thinking to yourself, well, now that we have ChatGPT, what do we need designers for? I can just ask ChatGPT for a pattern and it will write one for me free of charge, right? I've tested this theory, and the answer is sort of. I asked ChatGPT to write me this pattern for a child's hat with a folded up ribbed brim. And this is what I got. Now, I wish I could tell you that this was terrible and all wrong and loaded with mistakes, but I can't. It's completely correct. It's well organized. It has all the information you need. If you followed it, you would get exactly what you asked for. So what's the problem? Well, there's no photos, for one thing. You have to use your imagination. And there's also no guarantee that what ChatGPT has spit out for you is correct, unless you have the skills and the time to tech edit that pattern created by AI for you completely to ensure its accuracy. I wouldn't bother. It managed to recreate this very simple design quite accurately, but I would not trust it to do something more complex at this point. I wouldn't knit it up without completely tech editing it. By the time I've done that, I might as well have bought a pattern. I don't think all those fabulous designers out there have anything to worry about, at least not yet. However, it's an option, and I would have been remiss if I hadn't mentioned it here. Okay, the bottom line. Are free patterns worth it? Sometimes. They're fantastic for small or simple projects, or if you're just experimenting with new techniques. But if you're going to be putting in a lot of time and or splurging on a really nice yarn, paid pattern can save you a lot of headaches and might even cost you less than what you paid for that pattern in the long run. So fess up. Have you been burned by a free pattern? Do you have an extra great one that we all should know about? Let me know in the comments. We all want to hear your stories. If you had a good time today, go ahead and boop that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you can and if you want to. And don't forget that you can become a member of the After Hours Lounge with me and Oscar and a bunch of our great new Knitty friends. The information about the After Hours Lounge can be found through a link down in the description box. And if you want to see a whole bunch of patterns that I think are worth the bucks, go watch my wallet-worthy pattern video series. Keep those needles clicking. I say goodbye. Oscar says goodbye. And we'll see you next time. Bye!